here you see what is going to be the backbone of my new little shop here with UptaCraft LLC. Here's a Delta contractor saw, and I'm not going to bore you with the unpacking, but here we have it, all the pieces and parts that came out of that box. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a little assembly video. Figured I wouldn't bore you with all the styrofoam pebbles and plastic bags and cardboard boxes. So let's get to it and let's start assembling this backbone of my new shop with my Delta contractor saw. Okay, so here we have the main body of the table saw, the main box with all the innards, nice shiny new top, and of course we have the leg assembly with the caster, the locking caster. That'll be a nice thing for wheeling around the shop, making best use of space when I'm not using the saw. Then we have the nice Weissmeyer type fence and the various assemblies that go along with that, the factory miter gauge, and of course back here the two extension wings and the blade safety mechanism. Now, for the sake of having a temporary second workspace in here, I pulled my truck in only because the tailgate makes such a nice work surface and a place to organize my materials. We have some trim panels, other wheels and adjustable feet, the various assortment of screws and connectors, the push stick, factory push stick. So let's go about getting this thing started. Okay, well, it took me all of 2 minutes and 13 seconds to determine that no, they didn't provide me all the tools I needed, just some of them. So fortunately, I have one handy, but for anyone else who is looking to assemble a Delta contractor saw, you will need a set of metric wrenches. So here we're just tightening down our first carriage bolt, lock washer and nut with my 13mm combination wrench. Okay, so let's see here. Very early on in the assembly, you're directed in the Delta directions to assemble the legs and insert them into the main body of the saw. Now, I'm sure there's a good reason, but it was not called out in the directions that each one of these bolt holes is covered with a little black piece of tape. So my excitement at setting my legs into the base was quickly nullified when I went to insert the carriage bolts through the holes and figured I can't find the holes. So I pulled the legs back out, discovered that each hole was covered with a black piece of tape on both sides of the leg. I've now removed those, so now we're ready to bolt these legs together. Okay, so here we are with the legs. Not only was there black tape over the holes in the black portion of the legs, but there was also silver tape over the holes on the main body of the saw. So all that's left to do is to thread these carriage bolts through the leg connection and then tighten with a 10mm combination wrench. So we'll pause and get that taken care of and come back to you with the next step. So what we have here is the base now has the legs fully connected to each other and to the base of the saw. Something I didn't draw your attention to earlier, but you may have taken note of, is laying the cardboard on the floor. That's, I don't know, I've got a nice clean smooth concrete floor, but I just could not bear to have that nice new oiled cast iron top sitting directly on concrete. So nice little protection measures to take when you're assembling a new saw like that. Okay, let's move on to the next step. So we're not too far away from being able to turn this saw right side up. A couple things that are missing yet are the fixed casters as well as the trim panels. So we will install them next. We have right here, these are my two fixed casters. They are provided along with carriage bolts and lock nuts. So let's go ahead and see if I can show you the installation of them. You know, tough to do with a handheld camera. Give me just 1 second. We're back. Okay, everything has been attached from the standpoint of the legs, the base. You see the caster, the locking caster on this side of the tool. Something you'll notice if you're looking in the directions, if you have the occasion to make this saw yourself, you'll notice that I had to put a piece of 2x4 on the floor, a piece of 2x material. This was the intent with when tipping the saw over, that it be put under the saw on this side in such a way that it would protect the exhaust chute from being crushed by the weight of the saw as it's being tipped over. Okay? So, by the way, the directions recommend 2 people to tip this over and lift it up. It is possible by 1 person. I just did it. But you know what? It may be a good idea to get a second person. One little slip, one little problem, and you could be in a world of hurt if you were to drop this thing on your toe. Okay, next step here, we got to do the same operation twice, and that is to take this extension table and install one on both sides of the main cast iron table. Now I have this oriented properly already, so that all we have to do is take this and flip it over, and you'll notice the corresponding holes. So there are 3 screws with washers provided to attach one of these on each side of the saw. So I'll go ahead and do that and show you the finished result in a few minutes. Okay, you see here I have one where I have mounted the one side of the table, the extension wing, and only finger tight with the 3 fasteners. To Delta's credit, what you'll notice with these is that on these extension wings, the holes they provide are slightly oversized or in some cases slotted. To their credit, that allows for not only easily threading the fasteners together, but also allowing for fine-tuning the adjustment. One thing you're going to want to make sure to do when attaching these extension wings onto the side of the table is to get yourself a nice dependable straight edge and use it as a guide to finally tighten the fasteners. I'll demonstrate that here in just a minute. So what I've done here is I've taken some 6-inch bar clamps and used a nice box beam level, nice and straight, and used it to clamp not only from the cast iron top, but also to clamp over onto this extension wing. Now I can go underneath here and tighten this one on the front, then go around and repeat the same operation on the back of the table, doing this again for the other extension wing once I get to that point. Okay, so we'll show you the finished product here in just a few minutes. Notice that I have tightened the fastener on the extension wing, yet when I took away the 6-inch clamp, the table still sagged. That is not a cause for alarm, because that will then later be supported by the fence mechanism. So really the most important part is to get this joint right here flush, table to table. We will take care of this sag later on in the installation. So for the sake of avoiding camera shake, I've gotten a start on the next step here without really showing it to you on camera. Let's zoom in on here for just a minute. What we have here is 4 pieces of L angle. 2 are designed to go on the front of the saw, 2 on the back. These form the foundation for the future rip fence assembly. And what you have here in the L angle are slotted tapered holes that clearly are for flathead screws. Slotted to allow for plenty of adjustment and play. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually go ahead and fill each of these holes with a screw that comes with an included washer to hex nut and a lock washer. Another piece, this piece goes on here. You can see how the holes correspond with each other. And of course right here there's a mending plate to join these 2 together, keeping them nice and flush. So let me go ahead and just hang these, and then we'll talk about adjustment in a minute. Delta's pretty good about making it clear on the directions, but if you'll notice, the L angle on the front of the table saw is slightly larger and installed with the rear leg, well, I should say the top, the flange on the bottom. Let's put it to you that way. The L of the L angle is on the bottom, facing outward. Now, on the rear of the saw, the L angle is slightly smaller, and there the L of the flange is on the top. So it's an important detail to understand in the directions, because when you go back and take that same jig, whereas on the front of the saw it was supposed to be, the saw top was supposed to be right here in relation to the jig. On the back, this jig has been created to do that. So now you can check the jig all along the way here and see that this has been installed correctly in relation to the tabletop. So that step's completed. On to the next step. Really appreciate you following along with me on this. One item that would be easy to miss, but is a very easy thing to do at this point, is that we have a spreader bar here. You can see that each end has two holes that correspond with two holes out here in the ends of the two L angles. That spreader will be very important because it adds support to the fence mechanism so that when the fence clamps, it will have something solid to squeeze against. So, simple matter of installing this with 4 screws that have lock nuts. So, give me a few minutes and we'll have it installed. So here we have the fence with the gauge on it, the measurements, and it's in 2 pieces. So the directions are to use these screws to install these 2 parts onto this flange using those holes. So again, a simple process, won't bore you with watching me do it, but that is what it's going to look like when we're done. Be back in a minute. So I'm holding this up in a way that you can see that the holes on the underside of the fence correspond to the holes in the L angles. One important thing to remember, however, is that the power switch also have 2 holes that correspond to these holes. So these first 2 screws are actually going to go through 2 pieces of material before they enter in and catch the threaded holes in the finished fence. So important detail not to forget, otherwise you'll have your switch swinging in the wind. Well, the end is in sight. I'm quickly running out of pieces and parts and materials. So basically what we have left here are the various safety mechanisms for the saw blade itself. We have our miter gauge, which doesn't really take installation. And we have our rip fence. And the only thing to do there is mount the handle on the cam lock, put the fence on, make some fine-tune adjustments to make sure it's parallel to the blade, and we are quickly going to be in a position to make some sawdust. Stay tuned, everyone. Well, here we have it. One completed Delta contractor saw. I haven't turned it on yet, but I'm getting ready to. Is this how I'm going to have it set up? Well, no, not really, but in my anxiousness to actually turn the thing on, I've just got a short little cord that I've got it plugged into. As you can see on the back here, there is an exhaust port for dust. A shop vac dust collection system will eventually be connected to that. Delta supplied a few adapters and couplers to make that facilitated. Everything's set up. The only thing I don't have on the blade on the saw currently is the blade guard. We've got the pawls and the riving knife. Those are installed and ready to go. Okay, disregard this block of wood. This was cut with another portable table saw a few days ago, just making some test cuts. A couple things. First of all, everything needs adjustment, and that's a good thing, because if it didn't, well, maybe they wouldn't provide ways to adjust, and there will always be adjustments needed on a tool of this nature. So the fact that there are adjustments provided, these little plastic set screws on the top of the ripped fence adjust the height of it, the fence, in relation to the table and the measuring gauge there. There are also set screws on the back side here, one on each end, and by adjusting those just a slight quarter turn, you can use it to make sure that the fence is parallel to the blade, and that's also important in doing nice fine quality clean rip cuts where your material won't get pinched. You know, occasionally the grain of the wood could pinch the blade, but you certainly don't want pinching and potential kickbacks to happen because your rip fence is not parallel to your blade. So that adjustment of it is available there. Also, there are two set screws in the top. One there, one there. Those are for setting the 90 or the 0 degree and 45 degree stops on your miter adjustments on the table saw itself, so you can set positive stops there and make adjustments. What I have here are the tools that I used to do this job. I have them set up like this to illustrate. Well, of course I used my utility knife and square for opening the box and making some adjustments here at the end of the job. These here are the tools that Delta provides in the package. They will get you about 75% of the way. Here are the tools I provided, multi-screwdriver, and then 3 metric wrenches, a 13 millimeter, a 12 millimeter, a 10 millimeter, and then another Allen wrench of my own that I used for making the adjustments, the parallel adjustments of this part of the fence. So you can't easily assemble a Delta table saw only with the tools they provide, but if you have those few extra tools on hand, you will be able to install and assemble, I should say, this saw quite easily with satisfactory results.